Hi, friends. So no one's ever accused me of whimsy, which is actually a word I hate. And I don't traditionally like whimsical tarot decks. In the same way that I don't often go with themed tarot decks because I like... I just don't usually like them for the most part. But I thought it would be fun today to take a look at some whimsical tarot decks that I actually do really like. And that was inspired in part by the fact that I had actually forgotten that I ordered this last month. But so this is the Isidore Tarot, and it came in this morning, and I had ordered this because it goes in and out of print. So the artist who created it, you know, has done various editions over the years. And so this was a summer or spring edition that they did last year and made it available again this summer. And so I ordered it. And I really do like it, and it is sort of an interesting thing. Now, so we'll look at this a little bit, and then, you know, because I've never really talked about this deck before. I think every other deck that I've got behind me to talk about in this video, I've talked about in some way, shape, or form in the past. So this one I'll do. I won't do a full walkthrough of it, but we'll take a look at some parts of it. So this is a collage deck, and it is inspired by and primarily uses the work of the artist J.J. Granville, who was a French illustrator, and Isidore was one of his many one of the many parts of his full name. And so this is this edition. This is the 2018 spring edition, but it did become available this spring. And I think as long as there's still a print left, you should be able to get it. So I'll try to remember to put the link below. But if I do not, just Google the Isidore Tarot. So this edition was called the Sea and Sand. Previous editions had different colorations. They were a little more pink. I quite like this one actually because the sort of teal green is a color that I really like. And so there's a nice guidebook, and principally it came with the package. There are different ways you can get this, but I wanted the one with the tin, which came with the guidebook. You don't need to do that. I like guidebooks by independent authors because I want to know what they say about the deck, and appropriately there is a couple pages about the artist's work, and the artist is Bethelyn Bajema, and I have no doubt that I did not say that correctly. I should have asked. Oftentimes when I do these, I remember to ask the artist, and I did not in this case. So this edition was like the total package edition, so it came with the guidebook, it comes in a tin, and then within the tin is the deck, and then there are a couple little luau flowers there, and then in this sort of organza bag, there's the deck. And where I was going initially was that when a deck has a whimsical nature, usually what I like about it is that it's a little weird, and this deck is a little weird in its way. And so this will remind you of Alice in Wonderland. It will remind you of the Fantastic Menagerie Tarot, which is a deck that I have seen several times on Katie Flowers' videos, and I really want it, but it's out of print, Baba Studios deck, and we know how that goes. But this is a really nice, very uniform creation, and I find it really weird and wonderful. And that's why I got it. And so I think I had missed other editions or said, well, I'll get it later, and then missed out on it. And this one I said, let's do it. It's springtime. So, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's weird, and it's called a neo-Victorian tarot deck, and it's appropriately sort of, there's something very odd about Victorian art. And you see that in the original illustrations of Alice in Wonderland, for example. There's something, I don't even know how to describe it, just very kind of skewed. And I don't know, I think in a society that was repressive in so many ways, art seemed to create some really interesting responses to that, and these funky illustrations of J.J. Granville are a good example of that. So it's a really charming and weird deck, and it's not the most brightly colored, but one thing that always sort of irks me about collage decks is that they don't sort of look like they're of a piece, but this really does. The color tones and the choices are really nice, and they fit together really nicely. And so this is the majors, and it's really, I mean, I don't know what to say other than that it's strange and fun, like this Judgment card, which is exactly why I got it. Mother Goose is the world. There's a Happy Squirrel card, which I will take out. So the Ace of Coins, they look like records. But it's charming, it's weird, and I like, you know, again, if something is going to have a whimsical quality to it, I want it to be a little weird, and this one certainly is. And I appreciate that. It just has a little skewed fun to it, and that always tickles me. I was a big fan of Edward Gorey in my, well, still am, but in my younger days, and so that kind of, he's a great example. Actually, I think he saw in Victorian art and illustration that same kind of subjugation of norms in. And he exploited that by subjugating our own norms. So Edward Gorey is so interesting because his art was really cool, and very much inspired by Victorian illustration. And at the same time, it was about children being murdered and snakes hiding under the bed, and, you know, like, things we're not supposed to talk about, and there was always like orgies and STD. Like, it was his, as innocent and frivolous as his works were, I think he was subjugating our own norms, which was something that I think Victorian art was doing as well, because there was such sexual repression and such a need to, you know, corset everything, you know, women in particular, but just bodies and behaviors and manners and classes. And I think that Victorian art sort of held up a middle finger to that, and I think Edward Gorey used that to throw up a middle finger to our kind of modern conservatisms. So that's this deck. I'm not going to, again, do a walkthrough of the whole thing because you can find those out there, but let me just sort of shuffle. I haven't shuffled this yet because it came in this morning and I just looked at it, and I wasn't expecting it. I had completely forgotten about it because when I ordered it, it hadn't been printed yet, so it was like a pre-order, and then the deck was going to arrive, and I didn't realize that it had shipped, which I sort of liked because I had not been thinking about it, and whenever I pre-order things, I'm always like, where's the deck? I want my stuff. Like, I'm currently waiting for something I ordered on eBay that's taking rather a long time. I ordered something from Lithuania like a day before that, got it within like 3 or 4 days, crazily, and then this one I ordered from California, not this one I'm shuffling now, but the thing I'm waiting for, and I have no idea when it's going to show up. So this is not an everyday, you know, all-purpose reading deck, but I do think it has its purpose. Ooh, our Three of Swords. And I did not shuffle this all that well, but, you know, and it's Rider-Waite Smith, so like you don't need to like learn some new system to use it. And I don't think it's silly. I mean, I think that's the other thing that I look for in a deck that might be a little whimsical, is that while it might have a wink in its eye, it's not a joke. It's not something that's a party game. Like, you know, it's like the Gummy Bears Tarot for me is like a cute idea, but it's not something I would ever actually use. Like, this I would use, and, you know, so you know, you'll sort of feel like a Monty Python vibe from it or whatnot. You know, if you're coming for a reading about like the state of your marriage, I probably wouldn't use this, but, you know, for some fun with friends, I think it's really cool. And I do like the color palette of it. So that's what inspired the rest of this video that I'm going to do, is that the Isidore Tarot showed up today, and I think it's a really fun and winky and cute, in a good way, tarot deck. And so I like I said, whimsy is not my default position. And my sense of humor is generally a little darker and snarkier than whimsical. But, like anyone else, I have multifacets, and I do, I like to be charmed, and certainly whimsical decks can be charming if they're not infantilizing. So I will put this one aside. The next one I'm going to pull out, honestly, I don't really use, but I like it and have had many opportunities to get rid of it. It's a mass market. I think, so this is the only mass market deck in the pile, and it's the that's still in print. There's one other mass market deck, but it's not in print anymore. And what I'll do is I'll put the 2 out of print decks I'm going to use at the end, so that you don't get pissed if you don't want to see them. So this is the Paulina Tarot, and I always thought it was really pretty. It's definitely fairly whimsical. And I think this deck never really got used because, in part, it's a little, I'm gonna have to zoom in as far as I can. It's that's the only deck that was in order, by the way, just FYI. I think it's really pretty. It's oftentimes when I'm reading from a distance. So I am looking at this card and I'm probably a good 3 or 4 feet away from it. And so I can't really see what I'm looking at. And so it's a busy, a lot of the cards are really busy, but it is really pretty. And it's whimsical without being a joke. I always thought this would be a really good deck to give someone who was nervous about tarot. So clearly I've used this because there were some reversals in there, but I don't even remember the last time I did. But it's pretty, and so it stays up on my shelf, and I assume at some point it may come down. Decks do seem to call. I go through cycles. I go through months and months and months and months of just Marseille decks, for example. And then right now I'm having like a little Rider-Waite Smith immersion, just sort of returning to that very first deck that I used and others that are iterations of it, and enjoying, re-enjoying Pamela Coleman Smith's work. I talk a lot about how I don't necessarily read Rider-Waite Smith's style, but that is how I learned, and I pull from everything now. So anyway, this is the Paulina Tarot. It's not a deck that I use, but I do think it's whimsical without being silly. There is a little bit of a weird quality to it, which I appreciate, and I don't mean weird in a bad way. It's got a quirk. It's got a little bit of, under the sort of sunniness of the cards, a little bit of a darkness and a little bit of a theatricality, which I think is really great. So, and the backs are, how did I go wrong here? The backs are really gorge. Like, they're really, really beautiful backs. I think I remember hearing someone say, oh, I trimmed this deck and then I couldn't work with it. I think that the borders really benefit from it because the art is very, very detailed. It's not unlike the Shadowscapes in that regard, but I find the Shadowscapes a little bit easier to see what I'm seeing when I use that deck. And I guess I could include that here, but I don't really view it as particularly whimsical because I think there's a lot of darkness in that deck. Oh, I forgot one. Can I reach? Yes. All right, but that's for later. So the next one I've shown many, many times. It's I have 2 decks that are not Rider-Waite Smith, and one of them is one of my all-time favorites. This is the Marshmallow Marseille. If you watch my channel, you've seen me use it many times. It's on the cover of my book. This isn't whimsical to me in the strictest sense, but it has a very pastel color palette to it, and it's a little sort of softer than an authentic, real life Marseille, and there's a nice sort of pen and ink quality to it. So it does have a very, sort of children's book color palette and illustrative quality to it, but I love it, and I loved it from go. I mean, the first time I saw it, I had to have it, and it was the first creators that I went to when I was working on Tarot Unearthed, and I knew I was going to need to use sample cards, I went to them right away and said, can I use these? Can I use your images? Can we work something out? And we did, and you know, they charged me very little to reprint the cards, and sort of gave me, you know, they asked me to be respectful of the art, but they said, you know, use whatever you want. And they were really great. And so this is, it's very springtime, it's very fresh, and I think it's just so good. And again, not silly. It's not winking or joking about the cards. It's not a parody of tarot. It's a tarot deck, and it reads really nicely, and yet it has a very beautiful, soft, whimsical, innocent, neutral quality to it, which, you know, I appreciate. So, and Kelly Bear, who we adore, made me this great pouch, because the box that it came in I had used and it was falling apart, and she noticed that, she made me this, and it's like the same color palette as the deck, which was incredibly thoughtful. So that's the Marshmallow Marseille, which is out in a second edition. I have the second edition. I still use the first one because it was you know, it was like the deck I took everywhere for, you know, about a year. And I still use it, of course, but it's just, I like the first edition. The second edition has like this great holographic back, but I'm not, you know, I'm not as in love with it as I was with this first edition. Let's look at the other pip deck, because it's here. This is the Tarot of Musterberg. This is by Curio and Company. This is a deck that someone on Instagram, I thought I remembered who, and if it was you, remind me, that sort of said, you have to get this deck. So I had a weird thing with this deck where the initial printing, I was one of the, like, I ordered one of the last copies of the initial printing, and it got lost in the mail. And they said, oh my God, we don't have any other copies. But then as soon as the second one they came in, they sent me, without asking for shipping or paying again, they sent me a new copy. So it was really thoughtful. And there's an extra card in this deck called the Siren, which I don't use extra cards generally. But this has been referred to as the ginger deck because just about everyone has red hair. Which, you know, as a ginger myself, I appreciate. The cardstock is really nice. Like, it's a cardboard, it's not laminated, so it's not the most durable of cardstocks, but it feels like really yummy art paper, and it smells like art paper. And everyone, basically, even Death, who looks like he has a ginger beard, is redheaded. Now, the thing that always is sort of interesting about this deck for folks is that there's a whole, if you look in the little book and you look at the website, whoops, one of my lights just fell over. So if you look in the little white book or the website, they talk about this whole history, and the guidebook, the little white book, is actually this handbook that would be given to folks who would read cards at the midway of a fair, and but it's all made up, you know, it's all a story for the deck. This is a comic book company that made this, and it's very clever and sweet, but despite the sort of silly, you know, backstory that isn't real, the deck itself is very usable and very readable and very cool, and so I like it a lot. But yeah, someone said, oh, you have to get this deck, and I cannot remember who it was, but I did, and I got lost, and then they were great about it. But yeah, literally, basically everyone has red hair in it. So, but it's a pip deck, and so that was exciting too, because, you know, there are a lot of pip decks in the world, more and more as time goes on, which I really appreciate. But it's always cool when, you know, something funky comes out in the pip deck world, because I do really like reading with them. This one shuffles nicely too. It shuffles actually better than you think it will, because you pull it out of the box and it seems super thick, and you think the cardstock's going to be really rigid, but it's not. And so it shuffles gorgeously, and the back, that color is so beautiful. I love those greens. I don't read reversals usually, but with pip decks I sometimes do. And if I'm doing a reading that involves a situation where I need to know more specifically whether, let me zoom out again, whether a court card represents someone else or the querent. Like, this is an example where I have 4 court cards. 4 of them are upright, which would represent people in the querent's life. 1 of them is reversed, which would represent the querent. So I do that sometimes. I don't do it all the time. It depends on really what I'm reading about. I tend only to use reversals with pep decks because you don't have illustrations necessarily to provide additional context. You don't have to, and I don't always, but I go through phases. But as I said in a video yesterday, it doesn't matter if you change your tactics and your techniques as long as you set the rules before you do the reading. So if I know I'm not going to use reversals, I go in and I write all the cards before I shuffle, and I say I'm not going to use reversals. And there will be times where I'll use only the courts reversed. So I'll go through, pull out the courts, mix those up, and get some of them reversed, and then mix them back in with the whole deck. Because again, sometimes I will use court reversals to distinguish between people in the querent's life and the querent. All right, the next one I have talked about before. I think I've talked about all of these before. The next one is Dame Darcy's Mermaid Tarot. Not a deck I was expecting to like, but one I had my eyes on for a while because I liked the art style. It just felt very handmade. It felt really cool, fresh, very like summery. But again, theme decks are not usually my jam. And so I stayed away from it, and then this edition came out, and a friend of mine had posted some pictures of this edition on Instagram. I said, I'm going to get it. And I did, and I fell in love with it immediately. I don't really feel like it reads like a theme deck. I love looking at the art. I love the art style. It's got a surprising amount of representation of people who aren't white in it. And the art, it feels like old tattoos. I also find it, and this is going to sound weird, and I'll probably get shit for saying this, it also feels like a very queer deck. And I mean that in terms of like gender queer, queer sexuality. There's something about this that feels really queer in a really good way. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the sort of androgyny of some of because there are very clearly traditionally like busty seashell mermaids in this because it's a mermaid deck, but it's not all of that, and there's some very sort of like glam looking sailors, and I love this Four of Pentacles. There's like these mermen, and I don't know, there's something about this that feels like it has a subversive quality to it that's more than just cartoon, which is what I imagined it was going to be. And so I do feel like there's like a again, I keep reaching like this Hanged Man. There's just and it may just like if you are at all familiar with the history of queerness in America and in the world, there's definitely this like connection to sailors, and I won't get into all of that, but there's something about this deck that I have always found very queer and gender neutral, and maybe even a little draggy. But again, I mean that all as a compliment, because I find that one of the things I love most about this deck, and I find it reads really well, and I find that it's just, again, like I say this all the time, but I love being able to feel the artist's hand at work in a deck, and you definitely do with this one. And yeah, I love it. So Dame Darcy's Mermaid Tarot was a totally unexpected, and actually, again, here's a deck that's whimsical but has some weirdness to it. There's like a darkness, there's like a fucked upness to it, which I really appreciate, because life is like that, and it's funny and dark and weird and whatnot. And so this is a deck that I love. I don't use... See, this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the style and the sort of androgyny. Anyway, I don't use this deck as much as I should. But now that I have it out, I will probably leave it out for the summer. Because it is a very summery deck, and it really does charm me. Again, it's like there are some decks that you just want to work with, and this is a deck that I always want to work with. And it shuffles really great. This is one of those this is a term we're using a lot right now, is rose petal finish, but it definitely has a rose petal finish, and it shuffles really nicely. Hello Sailor. So I love this card. There's been there's been different iterations of this deck. There has been a little stuff around, some copyright issues and such like, but I believe those have all been addressed, and I think that it's great. I really, really, really want this artist to do a Halloween deck. Like, I'm just begging. I just really want a Halloween deck by this artist. Like, desperately. I love the Seven of Swords. So, just did a little walkthrough of the whole deck. Love it so freaking much. And again, it's whimsical without being cloying. Matte. This edition has matte gold edges, which, if you're going to gild your deck, matte is the way to go, in my humble opinion, because it just looks so good. I love this one so much, I'm just going to do a 9-card spread just to show you how it looks, because it's so pretty. Folks who have older editions of this deck are sort of put off by this one, by the borders. I actually, there's nothing about this edition that I do not like. So I will say that to noobs like me who are new to it. It looks so fun, doesn't it? And it reads really good. So that's a deck that I love so much and was totally not expecting to love. And please, Dame Darcy, give us a Halloween tarot. I'll just hand over my paycheck right now. What else? The last one that's still in print, although it may, I say that this was a Kickstarter deck, and I don't actually know whether it's like being sold at the moment, and I don't even know if I've shown this one yet. To be honest, I did show it on Instagram once or twice. So this was a Kickstarter deck called Tarot of Little Secrets. And the artist's name is not going to be on the box, is it? I think there's a little white book. There's a couple extra cards in this deck. So this is a whimsical feeling deck. It's Laura Stamper, and the text is by Sam Lofgren. I do not remember if I have shown this one before. Anyway, this is a mixed media deck. And it's the art style that has a very kind of playful and innocent quality to it that gives it, I think, that whimsical nature. But it's you can see the back has this gilding on it. It's got a playful quality to it, but it's not a joke. It's not winky. It's serious. And actually, it benefits from looking at it deeply because it's called Tarot of Little Secrets. There's actually little secrets in each card, and I don't know if you can see this, but at the base here of the Ace of Swords, there's this votive statues or figures, and then the sword has these. It looks like a high rise. There's sort of a shape here in the sky. So as you look at the cards, there's things that pop out at you, and so though the art style may look a little sort of whimsical, it actually is a bit deeper than it appears at first, and it really is pretty. And it feels, again, very handmade, though the quality is very nice. Glossy cardstock, I do not approve of, but it's not the glossiest glossy cardstock I've ever experienced. The titles and the suit numbers are just handwritten. I mean, they're printed on the card, but they're just sort of written in the corner. So like this is the 6 of Pentacles, so you see the 6 in the bottom corner. And then the courts have a symbol. I think the knight is a feather, the page is, the king is a crown, the queen has a different crown. And I can't remember what the page is, but probably come up and see it. So this is a Rider-Waite-Smith themed deck. Nothing sort of revolutionary image-wise in terms of the depictions of the Pamela Coleman Smith illustrations, but it's just it's a nice new edition of a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, and it has again a very handmade feeling to it, and shuffles really nicely. I do remember opening this deck finally and wishing it were a little more queer, a little more representative, of things like differing abilities and whatnot. But it is, by and large, it's a nice new deck, and so I like it a lot. And again, you can see the art style is kind of whimsical, but it's not silly. So if you can get this, I do not know at the moment. I probably should have looked before I made this video. I imagine that you will be able to at some point, but this was the Kickstarter edition. Shuffles really nicely, came in a nice box, and that's the Tower of Little Secrets. So I do put a disclaimer up. The next 2 decks I'm going to show you are out of print. You can find them on eBay. They are not always the most affordable decks, but like anything else, if you're looking, you can find them. The first one I talked about both of these before. This is the Children Tarot, illustrated by Lele Luzzati. It was a Llewellyn Lo Scarabeo partnership, and it is a pip deck with embellishments. This is a deck that, again, I have loved for a long time. Don't use it a whole lot, but I do love it. It reminds me of sort of Tommy DePaola art, Maurice Sendak. If Maurice Sendak and Tommy DePaola got together and made a tarot deck, this would be it. And so here's the 3 of Wands, and you can see that it's not entirely pip-like. There are illustrations on all the pip cards, but it's not Rider-Waite-Smith. This is a deck that charmed me immediately, and I got it very early in my reading life, and the reason it doesn't get used much is because I could only read Rider-Waite-Smith at that point, and you can't, unless you really have those images memorized, you really can't do that here. And then as time went on, I just forgot about it, but it's always on my shelf, and occasionally, I remember during one of the March of the Pips, I brought this out. It is so charming and sweet, and not cloying. It reminds me of the children's books that I loved when I was a kid, and it's simple and multiple languages. I know that bugs people, but I actually really like when decks have multiple languages on them, because I feel like there's just like this universality to it. But you could easily trim the bottom at least off if you wanted to. I have seen this on eBay. It is sometimes totally affordable and sometimes astronomical. But I do love it a lot, and I think it's really just so beautiful and charming and sweet and fun. And I think exactly what you would think of as a tarot deck for children or working with children. It's not scary. Like, here's the death card. So sweet, and just beautiful art. I mean, I've always, it's so good. There's a little white book, which somehow I managed to keep. I have lost so many little white books for my decks that I have. This one shows you how little I've used it, basically. There was a brief period, I think, where I thought about selling this. And I think I actually have a video where it was included in decks I was selling, and then decided not to. because I couldn't part with it. So the last one is a really popular deck, and again, skirts the line from whimsical into weird. This is Stella's Tarot, and this another deck that Katie Flowers talks about a lot, because this is one of her favorite decks. This is one of my favorite decks that I forget to use. The art is really, I mean, I almost didn't include it because it's not, whimsical isn't really the right word, except it is. It's really strange. But I love this deck. It's really weird. I wish the art was bigger and the borders were smaller. I wish the copyright was not on the side so sort of large and aggressive. This was an AGM deck, and it is out of print, but I sort of fantasize that they'll bring it back in maybe a slightly larger painting size. But it's like it's whimsical-ish, but it also is a little fucked up and a little weird. And again, when a deck, when something is whimsical for me, like that's what I want, is that it's just a little off. And this one is just a little, and I love the art. Like, it is so cool. It is so good. Every time I do a video where I talk about this deck, because I have a couple, I'm like, I need to use that deck more. And then it just gets overshadowed by other things I'm working with in my life. But maybe, again, I'll leave this and the Dame Darcy out and try to focus on that this summer a little bit. But I love it. I have seen it trimmed. I don't want to trim it, although you could easily do it and leave the titles on. But I'm afraid with this one, because it is out of print, it would be so small with the borders trimmed off of it. I just wish, you know, if only I were consulted when decks were printed, and I would say, make the borders much smaller and make the painting much larger. Although there is something weird about this deck where it's like it's hiding from you a little bit, and like that, it's like this deck always feels like it's peeking around the corner in a weird way. Let's just lay out some cards. Yeah, I don't hate the border. I just feel like the art is so cool. Like, I want to see more of it, you know? I want larger images of them. I know that, like, oftentimes the border on a deck will have to do with the proportion of the art, right? Because for a mass-produced deck, there are basically certain sizes that a printer will make for you, for a company. And so if the art in the deck doesn't match the proportion of the available sizes, then the printer has to do, the publisher has to do something to make it fit. And so they will create borders, for example, to do that. But these are really excessively large borders, so it's sort of like, no. It's such a cool deck, though. I really do love it. And again, like it lives in a whimsical world, but it is sort of like a little fucked up. And I mean, that's to me like, you know, I mean, if you go back and you read the original Grimm's fairy tales, which were basically all means of keeping children behaved and following the Bible, you know, there's something really fucked up about those stories, and they all get kind of sanitized by modern versions of them. But when you're a kid, you know, I mean, for me, like, the stories that I loved the most when I was a kid were like James and the Giant Peach, Matilda, Roald Dahl's books. Maurice Sendak always let you go to a dark place. Like, the writers who respected kids enough to not spoon feed them like sunshine and rainbows. You know, you want a happy ending when you're a kid, but like, you also want a little danger. You want a little ghosts. You want a little, you know, what's gonna happen? A little suspense. And I think Roald Dahl was not a very nice human being. But one of the things I love about many of his books is that he respected his heroes and heroines, the lead characters in his stories, whether it's Matilda or James or whoever. Charlie to be able to survive in these really fucked up worlds that are out there, and like they're weird. There's something weird out there. As a kid, you sort of are like, things don't make sense. And so when I look at decks like the ones I've shared today, a lot of these have that kind of weird thing that take me back to childhood, not in the sense that I feel like a kid, but in the sense that it like represents that feeling of like, something's off about this, you know, like this isn't quite right. And so when a deck is whimsical, but still draws me in, all of these have this quality of like, yes, they're cute, or yes, they're pretty, or yes, they're sort of fairy tale like, but something's off, you know, something's a little twisted, and that makes me really happy as a reader. So anyway, so that's just a little, you know, thing I thought I would do today, rather than just like a traditional walkthrough of the Isidore Tarot, to show some decks that fall into a category of kind of weird and whimsical decks that I still find readable and appropriate to use, and obviously really beautiful and cool. So hope you liked that. What are yours? You know, what sort of weird and whimsical decks do you get excited about? Love to hear it. There's one, like the Saki Saki Tarot, that I've always liked. I don't have it. I don't even know if you can still get it, but that's a deck that I always thought was cool. I have the Phantasmagoric Theater, and I didn't include it because I don't get it yet. I bought it on a whim, speaking of whimsy, and I don't know why I bought it. And it's just sort of sitting on a shelf, and people have said to me, oh, when it's time, it'll call to you. I can't get past that it looks like the Rugrats to me. So anyway, but these are decks that I do find usable, and I hope this was fun. Be good.